Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Life by Design podcast. On this week's episode, I talk with Jen Dugard. Jen is the founder of MumSafe, creator of the pre and post natal certification Return to Exercise, and also the author of the book, How to Love Your Body as Much as You Love Your Baby. With over 17 years experience in the industry, Jen is dedicated to enhancing the standards of care for mothers within the fitness community and beyond. Jen's dual mission is to serve both mothers and exercise professionals, ensuring exercise professionals across Australia, Asia, and the UK are educated and upskilled in working with pre- and postnatal clients while simultaneously educating mums and connecting them with trainers via www.mumsafemovement.com. In this week's episode, expect to learn the importance of the hypertonic pelvic floor, the guidelines that have changed for mums, the importance of pelvic floor physio, understanding the necessary core work, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Jen Dugard, welcome to the podcast.
How are you?
I'm really well. You?
I'm good, actually. I'm not someone to say that I'm good if I'm not, but I'm good.
Yeah. I reckon I actually really well is probably not quite right, actually, in hindsight. And I have got a lot better over the years of that point because I think that's really important of like just speaking your truth. I'm all right. I'm not like peaking, but I'm all right. Anyway, we don't need to go into that in too much detail. And we also have a third person on this call. Shani Timms, how are you getting on at the moment?
I'm also breaking away from just responding with good. So I feel quite like mellow, but a good mellow,
Beautiful.
you know? Yeah. And we've also got four because we've got baby and belly. So there's really four of us on the call.
There's four of us on today's call.
There's probably a dog entered the room at any point. So,
we could make it five.
Yeah.
And we could go anywhere today, but mainly where we wanted to go is all things pre-post-natal. So before we get kickstart on that, can you give the guys a 60, 90-second spiel of who you are and what's got you to where you are today?
Sure. So I'm Jen Dugard. I am a pre and postnatal, I would call myself an educator and business coach for those people who want to grow the go-to business for or become the go-to trainer for mums in their area. I started my PT journey way back in 2000, and I have to always think about how old Marley is. It was 2006, so 2 years before he was born, at Fitness First in Bondi Junction, Blake, which takes us back to where we met.
Oh, geez.
Yep, I spent, a long time ago now. I spent 2 years working there, left there 4 weeks before Marley was born. And then 3 months after he was born, I launched my business, which was called Body Beyond Baby, which was group exercise for with on-site childcare in Sydney Centennial Park. And then I did that for a decade. I sold that business in 2018. And along that journey, I developed a pre and postnatal certification for exercise professionals because I wanted to reach more mums. And I realized that at that point, I didn't want to grow my business, or I was considering growing my business to reach more mums and go into multiple locations, but I chose to go down the road of educating trainers. So I thought if I could educate trainers in what I know, back then there was basically no pre and postnatal certifications, or they did only focus on the pregnancy part. And then since then, I've moved to Queensland. I run a company now called MumSafe, and MumSafe represents exercise professionals that want to be that are the gold standard in working with pre and postnatal women. And we do ongoing education and business support, not just a pre and postnatal certification. I was like talking for too long, and then I thought I'd just wrap it up right there.
You did. You nailed it. So I'm going to see how we go. We'll probably get pulled in a number of different areas. But I'd love to go along a little timeline of pre-pregnancy, first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, fourth trimester, in terms of what you would consider the healthy things to do, to train, etc., how they change between trimesters, pre, post. So give us even pre-pregnancy what your recommendations are for safe mums.
So I'm going to premise this by saying anything I say may not be right for you. Because the older and wiser that I get, I realize I know absolutely nothing about anyone else's journey and what may or may not be right for them. So I'm going to offer some guidance and some, I want to use the word ideals, but it's not even ideals, based on personal experience, research, experience, and out there in the wider world.
Jen's an expert. Listen to her, guys.
You're
Anyway, what were you
downplaying
saying?
yourself.
Sorry, what were you
I
saying?
think that everyone that is an expert thinks that the more they know, the less they know.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, it's such a, yeah, anyway. Pre-pregnancy, one of the things that I will talk to at this point is there's a lot of young women walking around with what we call hypertonic pelvic floors, so pelvic floors that are too tight. And it is too tight, not too strong. So after I had Marley, I had a very, I was pushing for a very long time. The obstetrician said, your pelvic floor is too strong. Now I walked out of that going, oh, that's cool. It was hard, but I was I was strong. Like that was a medal, some kind of achievement. Really what he should have said to me was, you had a really hard time delivering your baby because your pelvic floor was too tight and you didn't understand how to relax it. Now I'll take that back to the whole pre-pregnancy part. And yes, we could go into nutrition and all that. Well, we couldn't because I'm not a nutritionist, but we can go into all of these ways that you could set up your body pre-pregnancy. But one of the fundamental things I think that young women need to understand is that pelvic floor isn't just something that mums experience. Like pelvic floor issues are not just something that mums experience. We've got this huge cohort of young women that are training to a high level. So they're doing all things right. They're ticking the cardio boxes. They're ticking the strength training boxes. They're probably eating well, maybe binge eating and binge drinking on the weekend. But hey, but they don't understand about things like pelvic floor, or no one ever teaches them. So if there's a young woman out there who is experiencing low back pain, painful sex, recurring UTIs, they're really strong indicators of potential hypertonic pelvic floor. And what I know is it's very rare that that woman will go to a doctor or a gynecologist and she'll immediately get referred to a pelvic health physio. So if we could teach all young women, in their teens, this is what your pelvic floor is. This is what it's going to do potentially later in life if you choose to or are able to deliver a baby vaginally. And let's teach you about the signs and symptoms of when things are not right. So for me, it's more about, rather than saying this is the most optimal thing to do, it's about educating a female woman, a young woman, to understand her body and to not just settle if something doesn't feel right, or to go to a doctor who says, we'll take these antibiotics and it'll fix your UTI. And then she's back 2 months later with the same problem. And they're like, cool, we'll just take this other one. And then a gynecologist, when we needed to teach her about pelvic health when she was younger. So understanding pelvic health from a younger age would be a huge, huge one.
Can I just jump in with a question before you continue? I don't want to break your train of thought. Can you just explain to me, I'm trying to understand the connection between a hypertonic pelvic floor and UTIs. Can you just I don't know if this is inside the scope of your work, but I'm trying to join the dots on that.
I was thinking the same.
Yeah. So if you've got a pelvic floor that is tight, so your pelvic floor has to relax when you go to the bathroom. Yeah. So if you're not able to relax your pelvic floor fully and empty your bladder fully when you go to the toilet, then what happens is you get urine that doesn't empty from the bladder. That urine becomes susceptible to infection. So she's never, you could go down the road of bladder health as well. And people that go to the toilet too often, their pelvic, the muscle around their bladder, which is called the detrusor, that they get like a little urge, and we're supposed to be able to shut that down. But as young women, we get, go to the toilet just in case because we're going on a car ride. And then you go to school and you go to the toilet when people tell you to go to the toilet. And then you take that into your teenage years or older than that. Like I know when I was at the gym training clients, I'd go to the toilet before I left the house. I'd go to the toilet before my first client. I'd go to the toilet after my next client. So 7 times in a morning. And in that circumstance, different to hypertonic pelvic floor, but you'll get the bladder stretches, the muscle stretches and stretches and stretches, and then most people can shut down that urge, and then it continues to stretch, completely fills, and when you go to the bathroom, you've got a nice strong muscle contraction around the bladder to squeeze it all out. What happens when we go to the toilet too much is we retrain the brain to think that, you know, the bladder is full when it's like a third of the way full. So on the flip side, you could have someone that is going to the toilet too often, and now the muscle is not strong enough to contract in order to properly empty her bladder. I just want to clarify, we talked about the pelvic floor muscle and the detrusor, which is the muscle around the bladder. They're not the same thing, but similar things that we're not taught as women when we're younger that can lead to things like UTIs, and we're just not given any extra information apart from take an antibiotic, you'll be fine. Or it's a normal part of being a woman.
Beautiful. Shani, do you want to jump in with anything, or are you happy for her to?
I'm just lapping it up. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. And I was also thinking, I'm like, you know, women, when we're pregnant, it's like we are weighing a lot. And I think UTIs are quite common in pregnancy as well. So I'm sure there's a link between those.
So just on that then, that's really interesting. Would you, and maybe I zoned out for a second, you might have answered it. Would you recommend like trying to hold a little bit longer when they do feel the need to go to the bathroom, or is it worth going, like obviously there's more of that happening in pregnancy, but would you recommend holding a little bit longer?
In pregnancy or just normally?
I don't know if the answer is different, but
I mean, look, in
both.
pregnancy, like if you need to go, you've got so many different forces at play, like depending on how far you're along in your pregnancy, you've got a baby bouncing on your bladder, bouncing on your pelvic floor. I think if you feel like you're going way too much, there could be, you know, go see a pelvic health physio. I think the answer really, Blake, is if something doesn't feel normal, go and get some support, go and ask the questions, go and get help. What I would say to all of those women out there, or, you know, parents that are coaching their children to go to the bathroom, take some spare clothes, take a potty, be willing to put them, hang them over a drain or by a tree. Don't make them go to the toilet on your time schedule.
Such a good tip. Yeah. Because I know for me, sometimes like, I'll just go just in case. And it's like, we're just training our bladder to be weaker. So yeah, that's such a good tip, Jen.
All right. So we've got a little bit of the pre-game sorted. Talk us through trimester 1 or anything else that you would want us to consider pre-first trimester.
Look, I think pre-first trimester, if you're someone that, you know, I'm a massive advocate of strength training, starting to build muscle mass as you're a younger woman is a really good thing, whether you get pregnant or not. And maintaining a healthier lifestyle. And again, like it means such a different thing to lots and lots of different people. And if you've been brought up on fast food and quick meals, well, adding some more vegetables or, you know, doing all those things that are healthier and are going to get you some more nutrients versus, you know, Shani, I'm sure you could probably give me lessons on the most optimal way that you've, you know, led up to conceiving and then through your pregnancy from a nutritional standpoint, mental health, you know, awareness, all of that kind of thing. I don't know if you want to throw in any of the things that have been working for you prenatally and then early pregnancy.
From a physical standpoint, or like all more nutrition and all the things? Well, I would love to throw a tip in. Honestly, like eating meat was a game changer. I don't know if you know, Jen, I went from being pescatarian and not eating much meat to eating meat like 3 times a day. And I do not know how women can get through pregnancy without eating meat. My iron levels are still so low, and I eat, you know, a lot of meat, and I supplement with, you know, spleen and liver and all this sort of stuff. So that probably would be the biggest hack that I sort of made probably a year out from us conceiving, would you say, Blake, just to like really top my levels up. And then, and obviously there's so many emotional things which we've kind of gone into before, but eat the meat, people. Get your iron levels up, because it's just absolutely pregnancy chews through it.
And I think that's everyone, right? Yeah.
Just on that strength training, obviously we've been in the field for a while, and we are big advocates for it. If someone, in your eyes, if someone hadn't been strength training and then all of a sudden considered strength training in the first trimester, would you recommend it? Or would you get them to stay on the path that they're on? You would?
Absolutely. The research is very, very clear now. The old research or the old guidelines around don't start anything new in pregnancy, we've thrown them out. Very, very clear guidelines in saying that it's more detrimental. I hate these words, detrimental, dangerous, like, you know, I don't want to scare anybody, but it's more important, or there's less risk of starting to strength train in pregnancy or do some kind of movement, shall we say, rather than just strength training, than there is not moving your body. So, you know, the majority of pregnant women are not meeting the general, like the actual exercise guidelines of what we should be doing as an adult every single week. So getting her to start any kind of exercise in pregnancy. The caveat on that, you know, you might want to avoid like contact sport, you know, things that are just ridiculous, but strength training is not. Like we can, you know, you can work with an exercise professional that can take you on a very guided journey from zero to, you know, wherever is right for you. And it, you know, trainers ease people into strength, or they should ease people into strength training anyway. And we take the same attitude with a pregnant woman. Let's ease you in. You know, at the end of the day, she's going to come out the other end doing the most physically demanding job she's possibly ever done, depending on her work. You know, she's sitting in an office, definitely, in the most physically depleted state that she's potentially ever been in. So she's had, you know, she's given birth, and now she has to go into a really physically demanding job with a baby. And we're saying, hey, don't do anything to prepare your body for that. That in itself doesn't make sense.
What are the exercise, because I haven't been in the game for a while, what are the exercise guidelines as they stand at the moment? And what do you think about it if you're allowed to speak to it?
I do. So the exercise guidelines are around I think it's around 300 minutes per week. I'm like, I need to pull them up in front of me. Or it could be actually, sorry, 120 minutes a week on 3 different days. I know in pregnancy, I'm going into pregnancy guidelines. So about
go there.
50 minutes a week. The most recent guidelines say strength training on 2 to 3 strength training sessions a week. Also says, I love that it says incorporate proper pelvic floor exercise. And when it says proper, it does then allude to getting the right guidance around pelvic floor, because there's some things that we can go into in that. And then it also talks about cardiovascular exercise needing to be moderate to high, and saying that, you know, you can't, it's just a casual walk is not going to give you the benefits that moderate to high exercise is going to do in pregnancy. So we are really encouraging women to, you know, build up your tolerance. If you've been doing nothing, don't just go out for a 5K run or do something crazy. But we do want you to be working harder than, you know, a gentle stroll around the block or whatever it is.
That is fascinating, because that's changed from the old days where it was all about don't get out of like zone 1 heart rate almost. When I left.
Minute, that's been gone for quite a while now. Yeah.
Interesting.
I know
Shani's got a question. So talk me through what moderate to high is based on. Is that perceived rate of exertion? Is that a heart rate? What are they basing that on?
Yeah, it's more perceived rate of exertion, to be honest, not heart rate. Like women's heart rate increases in pregnancy anyway. So it's very hard to kind of gauge where that's at. Even when it was 140 beats per minute, like, you know, we used to look at that and go, okay, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you feel like you are? You can be at 140 beats per minute and you can be really, really low, like low effort in pregnancy. So we're kind of going more on a perceived rate of exertion. Research is coming out and telling us that up to 90% of her maximal capacity is safe. It's just under-researched over that 90%. Now, we got to really understand that when we're talking about the research is generally done on the athletic population. So it's really important. And I see this on forums, on Instagram, on, you know, wherever it is all the time. It's like this new piece of research has come out and we can now exercise up to 90% of our maximal capacity. that's safe to do for all women. And it's like, yeah, not really, because the research has been done on an athletic population to start with. It's also not taking into consideration her musculoskeletal system. Is a pelvic floor coping with that? So cardiovascularly, maybe we can push her up there. But what is the consequences for the rest of her body? So relating that back to someone who's new to exercise, we would never push them up to 90% anyway. Yeah, so we really need to take a nuanced approach to going, what is the new research that's coming out? What is the experience that we've had so far in a clinical or in a one-on-one environment? And who's the person in front of me and what is right for her?
I think a lot of women who have gone through trimester 1 are probably like, how can we maintain our fitness levels and how can we, stay fit and healthy when, 1 o'clock we're on the couch and we're craving all the carbs and we don't have much energy. Do you have any tips for, staying physically active in trimester 1 when the energy levels are a lot lower?
Yeah, I think knowing when your energy levels are lower is important. So whether it's a diary or just an observation, like I'm always on the couch in the afternoon, cool. Well, can you get up at 7 o'clock and go for a walk or do some exercise? And just really tuning into when you can do that. On the flip side, if you're someone that's absolutely hammered by fatigue and sickness, sit on the couch.
Yeah.
We have all these optimal things that are ideal. Take the good days, go for a walk on the good days, or, do some resistance, slow resistance. Like slow resistance training is great for a lot of people. You don't have to move hard, like fast. You don't have to lift super heavy. You can move slowly. So I really also think about fueling yourself, because I think when you feel sick, you're not fueling, what is going to enable you to do that movement and that exercise without depleting you further, because we definitely don't want to tip into, well, I'm exercising because I now feel like I should, or I'm going to feel guilty if I don't, but actually I'm not managing to fuel well because I'm either being sick or I just can't eat and I'm fatigued. So it's really, again, that approach of who is the person in front of me, but really tuning into what is working for you. I will caveat, in the first 12 weeks, if you are someone who's gone through IVF or had a history of miscarriage or struggled falling pregnant, you may very well have medical guidance to pull back. And I would always listen to the medical guidance, because that's where there's the higher risk of miscarriage in that first 12 weeks. Yeah.
Not to shit talk any practitioner, but who would you seek medical guidance from or advice from in that? Like, who's the best person to speak to around that stuff?
Well, I guess, if you've been through IVF or you've had a history of miscarriage, you're likely to have either an obstetrician or somebody at your fingertips. Now, there is no research to say, or the research tells us that exercise does not cause miscarriage. However, statistically, it's more likely in those first 12 weeks. So we adapt to what the medical professionals are telling us with the woman's guidance. A lot of women who've been through that or any of those experiences, they want to do what's right. They don't want to put anyone at risk. So I think from balancing a mental or an emotional considerations as well, we need to make sure that she is comfortable, because exercising and feeling stressed that you're exercising because maybe something's going to go wrong is not helpful either. So again, you've got all the guidelines, all the ideal things, which only really work in the most perfect pregnancy with no problems. Yeah.
So just to kind of summarize trimester 1 and anything that you want to add to that, moderate to high exercise is okay. 2 to 3 weight sessions per week is recommended, and then total amount of time of movement or
exercise guidelines. Like, keep talking and I'll get them.
And then I think you said 120 minutes, or was it 180 minutes?
It's going to be the same across all your trimesters.
What, as in the guidelines are the same across the 3 trimesters now?
It's like I often find it hard to break things into trimesters.
Interesting.
Because And even postpartum, like, yes, there's different considerations. Yes, your mobility is going to change. Yes, your center of gravity is going to change, and we're going to get there. However, the recommendations don't change per
So heart rates and
interesting.
That's really interesting. This is so different to last time I played in this. I mean, it's never been my space, but this is so different.
When was that like
10 years ago.
Exactly.
Weird that things have changed.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got, just to clarify, we've got recommended weights 2 to 3 times a week. We've got moderate to high based on a perceived exertion, which I'm guessing is, if it's moderate to high, you're looking at probably between a 7 and a 9 out of 10.
Yep. Yep. Before it was very much the 7. And now it's like, if you're conditioned, then it's okay to push up to that 9.
Is there any changes on is there any changes on running or anything like that that's recommended between?
No, I mean, if we're running, I probably wouldn't personally get anyone. You could start running in pregnancy. It wouldn't be my first choice, because then I'd probably be guiding you to stop running.
Totally.
Because it's more like the weight changes and center of gravity and more like through pelvic floor. Having said that, there's more research coming out saying it's okay to keep running. Or more guidance around, if you are running during pregnancy, make sure you're under the guidance of a pelvic health physio if you want to keep running. So we can talk about that. But I would probably, if you want to keep running in your first trimester, keep running your first trimester. You know, there's less physiological changes, like boobs aren't quite so big, although mine were. I remember in Fitness First, I was like, people thought, like, have you had a boob job? And I was like, no, actually I'm pregnant. But yeah, like your body's changing, but it's not as far. So if you want to keep running in the first 12 weeks and that's what makes you happy, go nuts.
So talk us through then, if there's not guidelines that break down first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, what would be considerations that you would consider over the course of that, even if it's not split kind of down the middle, so to speak?
Yeah, I would start to consider. So I do sit in the camp of, if you are still running around that 20 to 24 weeks, consider pulling back, because that is when, you know, everything gets a bit heavier, the baby's grown, there's more pressure down through your pelvic floor, there's more pressure on your pelvis, there's more pressure on all of your joints. So if I've got somebody that is running at that point, I'm having a real good conversation with them. If I read the question.
The question was for Shani.
I got distracted, sorry.
But if you want me to start calling you babe, I can call you babe as well.
That's fine, anytime. No, so if they're still running at the 20 to 24 week mark, I'm saying, you know, would you consider doing something else? Could we get you, even if you want to keep running, jogging up a hill? Because when you're jogging up a hill, there's less pressure on your pelvic floor, and then let's walk down the hill. But we don't want you jogging up the hill and down the hill. Could we offer you stair climb, like doing some stair, you know, step, because she's probably still, a runner wants to still get that cardiovascular response. She wants to feel like she's working. Don't tell a runner to swim, because she's just going to laugh at you or swear at you or something like that. But I am definitely, if they want to keep running, I want to really make sure that she's under the guidance of a really good pelvic health physio.
And Jen, what about like core work? Because I know for trimester 1 for me, I did a lot of Pilates, reformer Pilates, but then it did come to a point in time where I felt that the Pilates teachers weren't trained in looking after people who were pregnant, and like a lot of the exercises, I was like, I feel like this is a little bit unsafe for my core. Do you have any recommendations around how we can look after our core?
Absolutely. So I would be prioritizing understanding how to switch on pelvic floor as well as relax, so we can get into the relaxation of pelvic floor as we continue talking. Making sure that there's not a big amount of pressure on the linea alba. So whether that's from intra-abdominal pressure in an exercise being hard, or from, you know, obliques working really hard and pulling on that linea alba. So that's what tends to happen in Pilates. Like there's a lot of core work that includes massive, big oblique contractions and potentially laying on your back, legs off the ground. So you know, your rectus is not working, well, you might be tipping up, but there's more and more pressure being put onto that linea alba.
What is the linea alba for someone who doesn't who doesn't know?
So basically you've got 4 layers of abdominal muscles. You've got your rectus abdominis down the front, external obliques, so the top layer of obliques. So you've got internal obliques that sit under that, and then you've got your transverse abdominis that wrap all the way around from the back to the front. All of those muscles insert into connective tissue at the front called your linea alba, and everyone's got one, male, female, whatever, and it's that line down the middle of your abdominal wall where everything to. Now, one of the biggest things to consider in pregnancy is abdominal separation or diastasis recti, and that is where the baby is growing. So the abdominals are stretching and stretching and stretching, and then sometimes the muscles get to a point where they can't stretch anymore, and there's connective tissue, the linear alba in the middle. That's the place that it kind of thins and stretches to accommodate a growing baby. So again, there's different schools of thought in what is right and wrong, which I hate even those words. But considering avoiding exercises that put a lot more pressure on that linear alba can be really helpful. And I think, Shani, if you were feeling like things weren't right, was it a big twisting movement? Was it a movement that you had to hold your legs off the ground or be in a plank type position that you felt like that was moving through the abdominal wall? And that's where we definitely want to have the skills to be able to make it easier or give you an adaptation.
And just on the abdominal separation, because I feel that mine have separated already. I can kind of see almost like a bit of a line down my stomach where the muscles have kind of moved out. Yep. Is there things that I could be doing now in pregnancy to kind of like help, the recovery afterwards? Or is it kind of just like, let's just wait till afterwards and kind of deal with that?
Yeah, so research suggests that it's going to happen to 100% of pregnant women. So there's going to be some separation of the abdominal walls and that stretching the linear alba. From my experience, one of the biggest things that you can be doing is really understanding that pelvic floor and transverse abdominis contraction to create that stronger innermost layer. Now, interestingly, when you activate your transverse abdominis, a lot of people think that it pushes the rectus abdominis together. It actually doesn't. What it does, your transverse abdominis activation creates tension at the linear alba and pulls those muscles slightly apart. So there are some schools of thought that go, well, if you're doing a transverse abdominis activation, it's pulling on the linear alba, so that is not good. However, from experience, when you do a oblique like your obliques generally in most people are a lot stronger than their transverse abdominis. A lot of people, their TAs don't work well. They've never been taught how to switch it on, especially if they're sitting in a desk job all day. Like when you sit down in that position, your body just doesn't work the same. So being able to, the tension it's creating at the linear alba seems to be a better amount of tension to create stability and control than the big bracing movement. So I would still suggest going to see a pelvic health physio, checking out your transverse abdominis contraction. They can put you need to decide whether it's the right thing to do to go use real-time ultrasound and things like that during pregnancy. They can put a real-time ultrasound machine on your transverse abdominis and watch your transverse abdominis. And then postpartum, we can look at what is the depth, what is the width, what is the work we need to do in order to help to rebuild that connective tissue in the middle.
And that is possible to rebuild the connective tissue?
It varies. And again, like if you're someone who, let's say you've had triplets and there was nowhere for these to go, and some women will end up in a situation where that connective tissue is so stretched and so thinned that no amount of work that she's able to do is going to help to bring it back or even to fix it. We're moving now more into the school of thought of we want to help to thicken that linear alba and regain tension there. We're not so much obsessed with bringing it back together and fixing the gap, unless of course that's an aesthetic thing that you want to get fixed, and that is absolutely entirely up to you. But I would be working at the lower level transverse abdominis activations, and one of the ways that we know that they're working well and doing their job is if you were laying on your back postpartum and you could at rest you could feel like some squidginess at that, and you can put your fingers the other way and kind of see how wide the gap is. And then if you were to do a pelvic floor TA contraction, does that connective tissue get thicker, and is there less squidginess, more tension is probably a better way of saying it, at the linear alba? And then that's when we know that the transverse abdominis is doing its job and it's able to create tension at that point. So if you're starting to do some pelvic floor TA now, it's quite gentle exercise that can get you ready for doing it postpartum.
Amazing.
What would that potentially look like, the pelvic floor TA? Because it's quite a subtle movement, if I remember correctly, isn't it?
Yeah. And so we're talking to women or men about gently drawing the front passage in and up around pelvic floor. And when I say front passage, vaginal wall, not necessarily like urethra would be the actual front passage, but most women relate to, or imagine you've got a tampon inserted, we're gently trying to squeeze it in and draw it up. And we're thinking about doing things to about 5% of what you think we should be doing. So we're not going, do this really hard or to the maximal contraction. And then transverse abdominis, we often think about, a lot of people will say navel to spine. I don't align with that cue at all, because when you draw navel to spine, you get this big oblique kind of contraction going on. So I would take it a little bit lower down. Think about low rise undies, drawing that back towards your tailbone. And that's where I would say gently draw pelvic floor in and up, and then start to peel your skin away from that undies line. So we often use the cue, imagine your low rise undies line is hot and you're gently trying to peel the skin away from your undies and not get a big brace. Blake, slide.
Is this kind of the thing that we've seen? Blake wouldn't have seen it on Instagram, but the hugging the baby, where you're kind of like contracting your belly back in slowly, and then you're kind of releasing. Because I've been doing that, and that feels quite good.
Really,
but yeah, I like that one of the hot undie line.
Yeah, think about the key is
say that again. Sorry.
The key is thinking about it being down low and not going too hard. So you're kind of like, as soon as you start to go hard, generally you get a lot of oblique activation in there as well. And there's nothing wrong with oblique switching on. We just want to make sure that you can tune into pelvic floor and TA first, and then the other muscles can come on around that.
So
love it.
With that, I'm just kind of tuning in and trying to do the movement as best I can. If it's 5%, I assume it's not too hard to hold for an extended period of time, but is there recommendations on like holding it for a certain period? Let's say, for example, watching a show. I can only imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, Shani might even be best, and we were going to get one, like a big fit ball and sitting upright on that and practicing. Is that the best spot and the best approach for it?
It varies from person to person. You can get good feedback off a fit ball, because although your pelvic floor is an internal muscle and you can't see it or feel it externally, sitting on a fit ball, you will get some lift, like that, feedback from lifting pelvic floor and then relaxing it onto a fit ball. So that could be great. The other good thing a fit ball is good for is stability, and also like moving your pelvis. There was something else I was going to say, and then in terms of how long should you hold it for, how hard should you go, should you do quick ones, should you do fast ones, that would be in the realms of ideally prescribed by a pelvic health physiotherapist. And that's because we don't know, right? So I wouldn't say to Shani, you're getting close to having your baby, you must do pelvic floor exercises, do this many. What I'd actually be saying to her is go and see a pelvic health physio, go and make sure you know how to activate your pelvic floor well, but you also know how to relax it well. Because if you go back to the start of the conversation, when we talked about hypertonic pelvic floor, if you've got a hypertonic pelvic floor at 38 weeks, it's going to be a lot harder to birth vaginally than if you'd have found out earlier on, and then you'd worked with a pelvic health physio throughout the remainder of your pregnancy in order to learn how to relax your pelvic floor. So for some people, they may not be prescribed any pelvic floor exercises. They may be prescribed pelvic floor relaxation techniques instead, which could be sitting on your fit ball, bum a little bit higher than your knees, leaning forward, really relaxing your abdominal wall, relaxing your pelvic floor. Could be child's pose is another really good position for pelvic floor relaxation, assuming you're not super tight through the posterior chain, because then it could just be uncomfortable.
I think this is such a good point, because it's like, the people who are pregnant, the women who are pregnant, it's like we get inundated on social media with all these different pelvic floor hacks and things to do. And it's like, if once you enter third trimester, you've got to do this. But what I'm hearing from you, Jen, is it's so nuanced, and it's like you do need that specified advice, because maybe it is about relaxing your pelvic floor rather than strengthening it. And I just think like, just hearing that it's like you do need to get that specific advice for you is just really important to touch on.
Absolutely. It's definitely individualized, and it frustrates me when personal trainers try and prescribe pelvic floor. It's like, actually, you can't do that. It's not within your scope. Yeah. And I think it's really important to consider, we're in a really privileged position, a lot of us, where we can go and get pelvic health support. So if someone listening to the podcast and you're like, look, that sounds really great, I can't afford a pelvic health physio, making sure that you're incorporating relaxation of your pelvic floor into whatever it is that you're doing would be really beneficial for the majority of women. So when you do your pelvic floor activation, can you activate, and can you consciously feel it relax?
I'm doing it now.
Is there any, and this might be how long's a piece of string type question, but is there any certifications or recommendations that you have when it comes to finding a recommended pelvic health physio?
So you've got, there is a differentiation between there's physios with an interest in pelvic health and then physios that have done pelvic health training. I don't know what the exact certificates are, but knowing that, do they hold, I don't know what it's called, is it undergrad, postgrad certifications? And then also having conversations with them or getting recommendations for people that have seen them before. I'm a big fan of women's health or pelvic health physios that use real-time ultrasound, more postpartum than in pregnancy, because again, it's an individual woman's prerogative as to whether you want to do more real-time ultrasound or not. But I do think that it really provides a visual connection to her pelvic floor. So if you're a woman, if we start to move into kind of early postpartum or earlier pregnancy where you might have gone to see a pelvic health physio, can you activate, can you release your pelvic floor? We're trying to teach women how to activate a muscle that they can't see and they can't palpate, and we can't see and we can't palpate as an exercise professional teaching them. Now, when they go and see a pelvic health physio, the pelvic health physio can give them feedback because they can insert their fingers, and that's what they do. Generally, they insert the fingers into the vagina and say, can you contract around my fingers? Now, that's all well and good because the physio can get the feedback and the client gets the feedback because her fingers are inside her. But what happens after that? She goes home, she goes into her next training session, and she's like, I don't know now, nothing's inside me. I can't feel what's going on. So if your physio has a real-time ultrasound machine, it can make it really easy to make that brain muscle connection between your pelvic floor. They can put the Doppler, it's on the bladder neck. And when you do, when she gives you a cue, you can now see on a screen, it's like using a mirror when you're a PT. It's like, can you see your knees now? Cool. They're not doing what you thought that they were doing, no matter how much we were cueing. Now we can see the pelvic floor. We can see the bladder neck lift when we give this cue, and we can see it lower. So now she knows, or she's seen in her mind, what the muscle does with the specific cue. We can also then see, because research suggests that 60% of women, when they think that they're drawing their pelvic floor up, they're actually pushing out. So we can now see on a screen, and a physio would see it, feel it. If she's got her fingers inside and someone's bearing down, she would feel that. But the woman can now see on a screen that, oh, when I think I'm doing my pelvic floor exercise, I'm actually pushing out. And then you take that into a training environment, and we as personal trainers say to someone, oh, at the bottom of that squat, activate your core, draw your pelvic floor, and she's got that mixed up, and she's been bearing down now under load, and this happens postpartum as well, then we're lining her up for potential incontinence, potential prolapse over time because her pelvic floor activation is incorrect. So back to your question, I would be wanting to find a pelvic health physio that's either got good qualifications or they're potentially under the guidance of a great mentor that has been in the space for a long time, because it's still a relatively new space. Ideally for someone who's got real-time ultrasound, although if you had to choose between real-time ultrasound and internal, you'd go the internal and forgo the real-time ultrasound. But ideally they do both. And the reason for that is you can't feel for prolapse or any of the other things simply with real-time ultrasound. But if you can find someone that's got both, it's a really great visual learning tool. It's also a great tool if someone is feeling a little bit apprehensive about seeing a physio. If they've got real-time ultrasound, they can do external assessments before they potentially do any internal assessments. That can be a good, entry point for some people.
I've also seen that they can help you learn how to quote unquote push or, do those movements in birth, because, when we kind of get into the birth state, they're like, okay, push. And it's like, well, how do we actually do that? And I have heard that pelvic health physios, they can actually teach you how to push for your body and your pelvic floor, which I thought was really cool as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really great program, actually. It was originally designed by Jo Murdoch, who runs the physiotherapy clinic in Sydney. She has a course called Born Ready. And part of that course is properly understanding your body from a preparation from birth perspective. That's not just what you get at the prenatal classes, which is how will you breastfeed? This is how you bath your baby, and what pain relief do you want? This is an actual program that teaches you about your body. Part of the program is they will see you one-on-one. They'll help you learn how to push. I actually think they might have something around the Byron area to have a look at.
That's cool. Awesome.
All right. So bringing it right back to the OG with thoughts, recommendations in across the 3 trimesters, and then maybe we'll start to get a bit more selfish in where we're at and the recommendations as we transition.
Oh.
Anything else that you think we should consider? Well, let's go back a bit. Anything else that you think people should consider across those first 2 trimesters, and then we'll go deep into 3rd trimester and 4th?
I think, one of the biggest things is, who are you trusting and who are you listening to? Because I think pregnancy is it's a huge can of worms. And if you spend the whole journey just like reaching for more and more information and Dr. Googling everything that's going on, it can be a really confusing experience. So I think when it comes to, exercise, movement, well-being, even pelvic health, who are you choosing to listen to? Who resonates with you and your journey? And then really tune into what they're saying. Obviously, question things along the way. But one of the biggest things would be try and cut out all the noise and get really good support. Who is your team around you? Who is your pelvic health physio? Who's your obstetrician? Who's your personal trainer? And, vet those people out and really let them come on the journey with you, because that continuity of care from, if you can do it, pre-pregnancy, through pregnancy, into postpartum, and then beyond that, is going to be really beneficial for your journey from a mental health perspective as well as a physical health. Yeah.
I thought Shane had a question. So, all right. So we're coming up to the pointy end. We've got 7 weeks till due date. Is there anything that you would recommend over the next 7 weeks? And then how do we navigate the postpartum?
Have you seen a pelvic health physio, Shani?
No, that's on my list of things to do.
I've
got one in mind.
Yeah. Number one. Number one thing to do is see a pelvic health physio. And while you're there, book an appointment for 6 weeks postpartum. Yeah, that would be my biggest piece of advice.
And is there any reason for the 6-week mark? Is there anything specific that's happening, or any reason you wouldn't do it earlier?
Most pelvic health physios won't see you earlier. Like you want to, for most women for vaginal delivery, we recommend around 6 weeks before. Again, like people are saying, you want to be moving before 6 weeks, so go for your walk and things like that. But we want to make sure that we're recovering. We've got a decent amount of recovery time, and the guidelines do still say 6 weeks postpartum. And then I was more with the appointment is book it in now so that you don't have to deal with it like that.
And what can we be doing at home in those 6 weeks to kind of like really take care of ourselves? Like, we would love to do I don't know if you've heard of it, it's like 5 on the bed, 5 in the bed, 5 around the bed. So just like really nourishing, ourselves as a family after we give birth, and just not overloading our, pelvic floor and going for walks straight away. But are there any sort of tips that you might have in those first 6 weeks we can do at home before we see the physio?
You can definitely, if you've seen a pelvic health physio in pregnancy and you know how to activate your pelvic floor and your transverse abdominis, you can definitely start with those things when you feel comfortable postpartum. It's not like you have to wait 6 weeks to do that. The other thing I'd be recommending is postural stretching and very light postural strengthening if you wanted to do something. On the flip side, it's like, there's plenty of cultures out there that spend a lot of time resting. So it really, again, you're going to get different, and I know that we're talking about your journey, but we're going to get different women, and some women that are like, I want to be exercising again 3 weeks postpartum. Well, we need to talk to that woman and say, hey, maybe you want to slow down. Or maybe you might consider waiting to see your pelvic health physio, or we need to give her more. You could do some bodyweight squats, some hip raises, and some, like back strengthening postural chest back activation exercises because she wants to be doing something. On the flip side, if you your goal is rest and recover. With that, what stretches are you doing to open up your chest, because it is going to get tight? What stretches are you doing to open up your hips, or more, stretch out your hip flexors? Because again, after pregnancy, chest is tight, hips are tight. And then really leaning into what feels good for you. I am interested in the 3 5s.
Yeah.
What is that?
I think it's well, yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, I think it is an Ayurvedic. It's actually meant to be 7-7-7. So the premise is that it's just getting women to really rest and kind of be horizontal for those first, at least 5 to 7 days. Because there is so much, like if you imagine a baby has just come out of you, it's like there's so much healing that needs to be done. So it's like when we do put weight on, our pelvic floor region and all of this within, the first couple of days, it can cause prolapse, it can cause all the things. Obviously, I'm not a, specialist at this at all, but this is kind of just from the research. And so just allowing the 5-5-5 or 7-7-7. It just allows your body to kind of like come back online naturally and just not put so much pressure on that pelvic floor region.
So the 5-5-5 or the 7-7-7 is, correct me if I'm wrong, Shani, it's 5 in the bed, e.g. like lying down, 5 on the bed. So in terms of starting to sit up and kind of move a little bit, and then 5 around the bed in terms of starting to move but not go too far. So yeah, something along, am I right? Did I get yeah.
And I think it's also encouraging like that, like nurturing bubble sort of energy of like, not having all the guests coming over and feeling like you have to kind of clean the house and do all this sort of stuff. So I think it's just like really creating that nurturing bubble energy for, your partner, you and the baby, to come kind of back to full health.
Yeah, I think there's my I'm like, I want to do the research now on what that does to your body when you're laying down from a muscular perspective. Like, how quickly are your muscles like not degenerating, that's the wrong word, but deconditioning by doing that? And where do we sit on the and I'm saying this with curiosity, no like anything.
Totally.
Yeah, so and then the other thing I did want to say is if someone's not able to do what you're choosing to do from a pelvic floor perspective, I think it's really important that women don't then get scared that they're going to have a prolapse. So I think, the biggest message is, what is your ideal? What works for you? What works for your family? What do you believe in? What cultures are you drawing from? What philosophies are you drawing from? And if somebody was drawing from all of them, that's perfect. And yeah, I mean, I advocate for everyone doing whatever the fuck they do at the end of the day.
What, based on your research, what would you recommend in that first 6 weeks in terms of movement? So what I'm hearing is obviously the posterior chain gets a bit weak, the anterior chain gets a bit tight. So posterior work in terms of strengthening the back and working the hips. What else would be your general recommendations, prefacing everything that you're about to say with the fact that you just spoke to different cultures, have different ideas, etc. But based on your experience, in particular that first 6 weeks before we see the pelvic health specialist, what would you say?
I would be personally encouraging some movement in a way that feels right for you. So if it is going out for a walk or walking around the house, and again, we deal with what is your personality type? Are you okay with being at home and resting? And I think it's really beautiful. And I look back and go, there's so many new, not new, but different approaches that when I was 27 having a baby, I wasn't even aware of. And I probably would have done some things so much differently than I did in like postpartum myself. Like I was like, okay, when can I get back to the gym? When can I do this? So for women on this side that are, I just want to know how quickly I can get back to the gym. Cool. Take it easy. Go for a walk. Do some mobility. Do some pelvic floor work. Do some gentle stretching. If you want to do some, strength training, make it postural strength training on a very low scale. And then on the other side, encouraging if you're not going to, going down here, be doing that, pelvic floor work when it feels right, gentle stretching when it feels right. Yeah, I don't think there is a right or wrong, Blake. And I think it's the same for probably both sides, or both, or the continuum, pelvic floor TA work, postural work in whatever way feels right for you to do it, stretching, and nurturing yourself.
So pre the 6 week checkup, if someone was to go and train, what would be the recommendation in terms of what would you, I mean, you're focusing on posterior chain from what I can hear, you're focusing on pelvic floor TA work. If someone did want to get back to the gym, what would you say? Nothing
Don't
that
go.
first. Oh, I thought you were saying otherwise.
No,
Okay.
no. I'm saying go and do get out and walk or do your postural stuff around the house.
Gotcha.
Not sending them to the gym.
Oh, okay, cool. So wait until you've had that assessment and started to build that pelvic floor before you go back into strength training of some sort.
Yeah, and a personal trainer is not
Qualified
with anyone pre 6 weeks.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And what would you be looking for in a personal trainer, or getting back to the gym, if that was a goal for you, and you've been given the all clear by your pelvic health physio? What would we be looking to do?
Yeah, I'd be number one asking what their qualifications are, because a lot of women don't think to ask. They just assume that if you're a personal trainer, you know what to do. And there's a lot of trainers out there training women with absolutely no postnatal qualification. And then I would also, if you want to go deeper into that, is what qualification do you hold? How many hours did it take you to get that qualification? Because there's plenty of 3-hour short courses out there that, in my book, they're a good taster, and it's designed to tell you what you don't know, and then your responsibility is to go learn more. Another real good giveaway is, what is your pre-exercise experience? So number one, do they do a pre-exercise screening? Because there's a lot of places out there that don't even do them. And number two, what questions are on that pre-exercise screening form? So generally, there's 3 questions that are a real giveaway. So if the only questions that your trainer asks you are, have you had a baby in the last 12 months? Have you had your 6-week checkup? And do you feel okay? If they're the only questions they ask you, they're probably not qualified. They need to be asking you, what kind of delivery did you have? Did you have a vaginal delivery? Did you have a C-section? If you had a vaginal delivery, how long were you pushing for? Did you have an episiotomy, or did you have any tearing? If you did, was it grade 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, or grade 4? How have you recovered afterwards? If you had a C-section, were you pushing beforehand? Was it an emergency? Was it planned? Why was it planned? Did you know you had a hypertonic pelvic floor? Therefore, you had a very educated conversation with your carer, with your birth team, to choose a C-section because you knew you couldn't relax your pelvic floor? Or was it an emergency C-section because you had no awareness around that in that time? Then they should ask about your pelvic floor. Then they should ask about abdominal separation. And not only should they ask all the questions, is they should be able to guide you through an initial pelvic floor, I guess, teaching session. Even though we can't tell you if you're doing it right or wrong to 100%, we can go hands-on. We can guide you around contracting and releasing pelvic floor. We can check you for abdominal separation. We can't diagnose and tell you that you've got a diastasis, but we can definitely feel. And then a well-educated trainer will be able to use that information to design a program or lead you through through exercise that is not, that takes into consideration any of their findings. So if you walk into a gym and they just put you in a class, I'd probably walk out again. If there's no pre-exercise screening, I would walk out again. And yeah, if the pre-exercise screening is not good, I would find somebody else. Yeah.
Have you got a list of your trained, trainers who have actually done your certifications? Because that would be amazing, little black book almost.
Yeah, we've got a list on our website of all of our MumSafe trainers. So
Awesome.
To become a MumSafe trainer, you have to hold a certification, and you have to be partnered with a pelvic health physio, and be a registered exercise professional, and be committed to ongoing education. So inside MumSafe, we provide our trainers with a brand new masterclass to increase and deepen their knowledge every single month. So we've got that on our website, which is mumsafemovement.com. There's also a directory of pelvic health physios on that website as well. Yeah.
Insane. That's so good.
This has been fascinating. It's wild how much has changed in the last like 10 years since I last had any insight and understanding into this space. Anything else? What's that?
I was going to say, it's funny how you feel like it's changed because I feel like it's going so slow.
Yeah, because you're in it. You're in it.
Because you're in it. Yeah.
Like dragging people along
Yeah.
and trying to say educate trainers and trying to educate gyms and say like we need to do this better. Like being a mum one doesn't qualify you to know everything about pregnancy and postpartum, because that's what a lot of gyms believe. Oh shit, they're mums, they're women, they just know. Well, we don't know. And then getting gyms and trainers when women are walking through the door anyway to say, hey, you need to update your policy, you need to change your procedures, and you need to do this better. I think that what they're not seeing is the women that are suffering in silence, that are leaking when they're doing the exercise, that have a prolapse that's not diagnosed, and that will eventually leave their environment and potentially stop exercising because their body doesn't feel right. And we have to have this, I guess, whether foresight's the right word or look to the future to go, we want women to be exercising for a really, really long time. And there's this huge conversation in the marketplace around now around women's health, but specifically menopause. If we don't help women in pregnancy and postpartum to get it right, those women that go through menopause are going to have a much harder time than the everyday woman that hasn't been through pregnancy and birth.
Is there anything else you recommend in that postpartum era?
I think maybe it's just back to the playing in your own, like being in your own lane. And it's really easy after you've had a baby to start comparing your journey and yourself to other people and what's going on around you. And I think that's in no matter what space you're in. So, and I guess as well, if something doesn't feel right, ask for help, and then ask again if you don't get someone that listens to you. So really advocate for yourself. Like especially if you're someone that's not managed to do that beforehand, like maybe you've gone through a whole lot of health things and no one's really listened to you, be brave enough to stand up or, lean on people around you and talk to someone that will be with you to get support. And just, if something's not right, go back and ask more questions or find the right people. And hopefully you found them in pregnancy, but definitely postpartum. And don't let the baby come first. Yes, the baby is a huge priority. And I'm not going to say you've got to look after yourself to look after the baby, because I think that's shit. You need to look after yourself because you deserve to be looked after. And then that flows on to being able to be there as a mum.
Excellent.
Yes, that's a mic drop at the end. Nailed that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. That was like so insightful, and I personally learned a lot, and I'm glad that we could ask a few selfish questions along the way. But yeah, I'm really grateful for your time.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Beautiful. So Jen, quickly before you bounce, where's the best spot to send people for all your mama magic?
If you're a mum, go to mumsafemovement.com. That's on Instagram and on the website thing. And if you're a trainer and you want to get everything comes under Jen Dugard. So it's Jen Dugard on Instagram, and then it's jendugard.com online.
You're a Jedi. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Jen.